This is going to be a wild offseason for the Louisville football program, but one thing is for certain, and that is that Jeff Brohm and company need to do whatever they can to keep Isaac Brown and Duke Watson Cardinals.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to personally take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. In just about a week after the final regular season game, the transfer portal is going to go crazy once again for college football. It's going to be a wild offseason for Louisville, but one thing is for certain, that is that Jeff Brohm and company have to do whatever they can to keep Isaac Brown and Duke Watson Cardinals for next season and for the entirety of their college careers. We'll also dive into the weekly mailbag, a lot of great questions, whether or not Louisville will go after a portal quarterback, how big of a loss is losing 2025 decommitment Jordan Allen, and much, much more. So a lot of football talk on the show today. And look, this is going to be a really wild month of December and wild month of January. Louisville is going to have to once again utilize the portal in a major way to fill the needs for next year's team. They've done it the past two off seasons that Jeff Brohm has been here. They will once again do it this off season. But another part of this that is key is that the Cardinals need to once again make sure that some of their top contributors don't enter the portal, because they have been very good at making sure that they keep their players after each season since Brohm has been here. They've lost a couple players, but for the most part, Jeff Brohm and company have done a fantastic job at roster retention. That is going to be the case for this year's team, and it's critical that the Cardinals do whatever they can to keep Isaac Brown and Duke Watson members of this team. And I think that is sort of a unanimous opinion held by the entirety of the Louisville fan base. And it starts with Isaac Brown doing something that not many freshman running backs have done in Louisville history. If it wasn't for Lamar Jackson, Isaac Brown would hold the record for most rushing yards by a freshman in program history. He currently has 896 games with another regular season game to go. Lamar Jackson had 960 back in 2015, and he's has a chance to break that record against Kentucky with less than 100 yards. And I think it's even more impressive that he's almost at the 1,000-yard mark, considering that, against Jacksonville State, he only carried the ball 8 times. He had 3 carries for 7 yards against Georgia Tech. Had 9 for 56 against Miami, got hurt against Stanford, only had 2 carries for 3 yards. So there's been, 4 or 5 games where he just hasn't been used all that much in terms of running the football, but his big performances have been so important that he's close to 1,000 yards. 13 for 93 and 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh, 20 for 151 and a touchdown against Boston College. Against Clemson, 18 for 85 and 2 touchdowns against Boston College. He had 146 yards and 2 touchdowns against Miami. So 121 carries for 896 yards and 9 touchdowns. He has 9 rushing touchdowns. He has 1 receiving touchdown. And he's averaging 7.4 yards per carry. He is having one of the best seasons by a Louisville running back in program history. And the national media is finally starting to catch on. Like, you're finally starting to see some praise. Like, we went from before the season saying that, well, Isaac Brown could leave his mark on this team. Or, well, he looks really good for a freshman. Now it's like, okay, he's one of the best running backs in the conference already as a true freshman. So if he's this good right now, and that is with some issues at the tackle spots for Louisville. That's with having to share carries with Keywan Brown, Duke Watson, Don Chaney Jr. That's with an offense that likes to throw the ball a lot. I can only imagine what he's going to be able to do in the future, because you can't discredit another full offseason in the same system and in the collegiate workout program. Like, Isaac Brown's probably going to add some more strength, 5'9", 190 pounds. He's probably going to add some more strength. I imagine next year he would be even more so involved in the passing game. But we're talking about a player that I don't want to, overspeak or speak too soon. We're talking about a player that could be one of the best running backs in college football next year. And I don't think that that's hyperbolic. Like, one thing that I don't like to do on this show is I don't like to give a ton of hot takes. I don't like to just throw takes out there just for the sake of, creating, a reaction. I try to put as much research into a take before I make it or formulate and then make the take. So Isaac Brown is a phenom already. And I think he's only going to get better. I think next year he has the potential to be better than Jawar Jordan was when Jordan had that fantastic start to the season, and he has been incredibly, he's been incredible this whole season, and I really do think that Louisville has to do whatever. Now, when you look at portal, the portal market for certain positions, running back is a spot that doesn't usually cost as much to fill those spots as would like a quarterback or a defensive lineman or a premier offensive lineman. So that's good in Louisville's case, is that, they have the NIL in place. Like, go ahead and get him set up. And I think that Louisville is definitely working on doing just that. But the other player, I think that it is important that also Louisville doesn't let Duke Watson go. Duke Watson has been a player that has surprised me even more than Isaac Brown. Like I said before the season, I think Isaac Brown is the most talented running back on this team. What I didn't know was that Duke Watson, number one, was going to be this good this quickly, but also, number two, be able to get the reps. Now, a lot of that's because Maurice Turner spent a good portion of the year injured. Penny Boone decided to not come to Louisville. Don Chaney has spent some time injured as well. Keywan Brown has looked pretty solid, but Duke Watson's been the second best running back on this team. He's averaging 8 yards a carry. He has 5 touchdowns and 8 yards a carry, 51 carries for 410 yards. The 6-foot running back from Forsyth, Georgia. I felt like for him to be, serviceable at this level, he was going to add weight. He's going to have to add weight to make sure that he's good in pass pro and to be able to, just to play at this level. But I was obviously wrong. He has been an absolute fantastic player for this team. I mean, when Isaac Brown hasn't answered the bell, Duke Watson has. He carried the ball 11 times for 117 yards and 3 touchdowns against Stanford. Why they went away from him late in that game, I don't know. But I think that this is a very Maurice Turner-esque freshman season for Duke Watson, where he played second fiddle to the starting running back. But I would also argue that the ceiling is considerably higher for Duke Watson, going through their career. And I think that you have to do whatever you can to keep this tandem together, because if you do so, I mean, right off the bat, you're making it to where, number one, you don't have to fill that hole, because there's going to be a ton of holes that you have to fill in the portal. But number two is you return, I would argue, the best running back duo or committee in the ACC, because there's going to be players, Phil Maffa will go to the NFL for Clemson, Damian Martinez and company will go to the NFL from Miami. You look down the list, Louisville could very well, going into the season, have the best running back room in the conference. And I think that that's a huge strength to have, especially since Louisville is a pro offense. They like to build the pass up on the run. They like to, utilize a ton of play action. And I think that one way that you can ensure that that's going to be good next season is you have absolutely electric running backs, because right now they do, and that's something that you have to focus on. Now, will they lose some other running backs to the portal? There's a very good chance, because you can't. There's only one ball to go around. Like, there's not, enough carries for everyone in the room. So I could see there being some attrition in the running back room. But one thing's for certain: you have to make sure that Isaac Brown and Duke Watson stay Cardinals. So that is definitely one of the main priorities of the offseason. But you'll find out when we dive into the mailbag that some fans are wondering if going after a quarterback is another priority in this offseason. We'll dive into the first of the two mailbag segments when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, we've been keeping it locked on right here on Game Time, the official ticket marketplace of the Locked On Podcast Network, with Louisville basketball getting into the full swing of things. There is no better way to fill all of your ticketing needs than Game Time. When you download the Game Time app, I promise you, you're not going to want to look anywhere else. From the all-in pricing feature that you can toggle on that will remove the surprise fees at checkout. You have the panoramic views from your seats. You have Game Time Picks, which is a feature that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. So do yourself a favor. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Cardinal fans, want to take this time to once again thank you all for making us your first listen of the day throughout this football regular season. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We're diving into this two-segment part mailbag. A lot of great questions. I wanted to highlight 4 because I feel like this was one of the better mailbags that we've had this season. 2 mailbag questions a segment. It begins with, will Louisville go after a transfer portal quarterback in the offseason? Well, let's look at the numbers aspect of this. You're losing Tyler Shuck. I believe you're losing Harrison Bailey as well. Some people said like he has another year of eligibility. I don't know if that's the case, truthfully. Looking at the numbers here, he 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, and 24. 2020, you have the COVID year, and then you redshirted again in 2021. So, I mean, yeah, technically he would still have a COVID season or a redshirt season to play, so you could bring back Harrison Bailey. You'll bring in Mason Mims, likely. So let's take like, if everyone were to stay on paper, like if Harrison Bailey were to stay and Mason Mims were to stay, like on paper, you would have 5 quarterbacks with Deuce Adams, Pierce Clarkson, and Brady Allen. But I don't feel like that's going to be the case. Like I don't see both Allen and Clarkson staying. I think at least one of the two is going to leave. Harrison Bailey might stay, but then again, I'm not sure. I am firmly in the camp of, I think Louisville's going to go after a portal quarterback just at the very least to compete, to give Louisville another player in that spot. Because here's the thing about it is, if they do go after one, that goes to show you that there might not necessarily be the belief in Clarkson or Allen, or maybe Deuce Adams just isn't ready. Same with Mason Mims, or maybe Harrison Bailey's not that guy. But I do think that Louisville is going to go after a portal quarterback to, at the very least, let them compete. And if one of the guys on the roster right now ends up winning that job, then that's great in the name of development. But I do think that the Cardinals are not going to put themselves in a position to where, they don't have the quarterback position figured out. I think that Louisville could definitely look after going after a portal quarterback in this transfer portal cycle. I know that that's tough for some people to hear because they want Pierce Clarkson to be that guy. And I hope that he is. I hope that Pierce Clarkson ends up being that guy. I'm just not so sure that he's going to be. So we will see. The same thing goes with Brady Allen. And the thing about it is that if these players, like, what's stopping them from entering the portal right after the season? Like, if you would have to have an idea as a player right now that, hey, look, are you going to go after a portal quarterback? And if you do, I think that tells me all I need to know, and I'll go ahead and enter the portal and try to find a place where I can play. I think that's probably the mindset of those two quarterbacks, and Clarkson and Allen, and maybe even Harrison Bailey. So we will see. But right now, I think that regardless, Louisville will go after a portal quarterback to fill depth, because I don't think that they're going to bring all the quarterbacks minus Teller Shuck back for next season. Does Louisville need to win the game against Kentucky for this to be considered a successful season? I look at this in two parts. Number one, can this season still be successful? Like, even if you beat Kentucky, can it be successful? Or number two, and this is from a lesser standpoint, can this season still be successful at 7-5 with a bowl win? I think the second part, that answer is no. I think that if you go 8-4, you beat Kentucky, I think that that's a successful season. I know that a lot of people had playoff aspirations, as did I. I predicted that this team was going to go 10-2, and I felt like 10-2 was going to put you in a good spot to go to the ACC championship game. It's going to put you in a spot to be able to contend for a college football playoff spot. But ultimately, that's just not what happens. So what you have to do now is sort of, kind of bring your expectations back. And I remember it being a talking point in the offseason, does an 8-4 season with a win against Kentucky appeal to you more than a 10-2 season without a win against Kentucky? And I was really on the fence. Like, I was right in the middle of that argument, because on one side I'm like, yeah, 10-2 is great. But 8-4 with a win against Kentucky, and you snap that streak, and that would be huge. So I think 8-4 with a questionable loss to Stanford, but you barely lost to Notre Dame and Miami and SMU, but you beat Clemson on the road and Kentucky on the road, they would probably accept. And that's something that I look at as well. And if you are making the suggestion that it can't be a successful season because you're not competing for the playoff, I feel like last year, and look, I don't want to undersell what this program can become, but let's talk about what this program is right now. You won 10 games with a very, I'll say, opportunistic and easy schedule. You won 10 games, and that's great. Did you overachieve? I wouldn't really call it overachieving, because the schedule wasn't all that great. But if you were to win 8 games with a considerably tougher schedule, I think that it's almost as impressive as the 2023 campaign, especially if you beat Clemson for the first time in program history on the road at night, and then you also snap the losing streak to Kentucky. Now, would it be different if, let's say, you beat Stanford and SMU, but you ended up losing to Clemson and Kentucky? Then you might have a case for 8-4 being a little bit more disappointing. And I would definitely agree with you if you tried to make that point. But this program right now is one that perennially wins anywhere from 6 to 8 games with the occasional double-digit win season. It's been like that all of my life since I was born in 1998. I know that in the new 12-team college football playoff era, with how NIL is now, Louisville fans believe that the Cardinals should be contending for the ACC and the college football playoff every single season. And as much as I want that to be the case, right now, it is not. Until you show me that it is the case, I can't sit here and tell you that it is, because it's not. It's not the case right now. Louisville is a program that wins, when they're good, they usually win between 7 to 9 games, occasionally winning 10 games, and you sort of rinse and repeat. And that's what Louisville has been for my entire life. Like, you have some really good years built in, the Orange Bowl year, the Sugar Bowl year, last year, 2016 up until the end, so on and so forth. Until you show me that every single season you are competing for the college football playoff. Well, truthfully, for me, until Louisville makes the college football playoff, it's hard to say that this is the expectation. It could be the hope, but might not necessarily be the expectation. Like, can Louisville get there? I think they can, but are they there right now? They are not. And some people will say, well, you're just being pessimistic. No, that's having an honest look into where this program is at. And there's going to be a question, kind of built in at the end of the mailbag that will kind of tie everything together. But when we come back, recruiting is at the forefront in this. Louisville's made it very clear they're going back to the portal to fill these needs. Is this the most important portal window in the three that Jeff Brohm will be at the helm of the Louisville Cardinals? Very possibly. We'll answer that when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, Louisville is currently a 3.5-point favorite over the Kentucky Wildcats on Saturday, according to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I wish this was available for me, but if you are new, you've never used it before, new FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And then there was one segment left in the mailbag or Tuesday episode of the show. I honestly thought that was going to sound much cooler, and then I realized it was kind of lame. But two more questions remaining, and I teased the first one, and that is this the most important portal window since Jeff Brohm has been here? This will have been his third transfer portal window. He has been really involved in the past two. He's had one of the better transfer portal recruiting classes in the country over the past 2 years, and it's now offering the question, is this the most important of the three? And truthfully for me, I would say that it is, because you are losing some of the players that were held over from the Satterfield teams, like Ashton Gelati, Quincy Riley, Des Tell, Michael Gonzalez. The list goes on. MJ Griffin, TJ Quinn, possibly Ben Perry, you name it. So you've made a habit to use the portal to fill your needs every season, to bring in, close to 30 transfers every year. This will be the most that you've lost in an offseason. Like last year, you lost some key players, but you also brought back some of the key veterans. Well, you lose those players that decided to come back because they don't have any more eligibility. So by default, you're having to replace more internally. And not to mention, you're not really bringing back much in terms of returning production. You are replacing close to, I would say, 90% of your production. And you don't have that great of a high school class that's going to fill in either. So Louisville's going to have to go portal heavy, and this is 100% without a doubt the most important portal window since Jeff Brohm has been here. I don't think it's close. You could say, well, maybe the first window, but even then, I think that this is even more important because that would have been year one. This is year three, though. You're looking for the Cardinals to take another step forward, right? Well, for them to do that, they're going to have to be very, very good in the portal. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yeah, this is without a doubt the most important portal window in Jeff Brohm's tenure here for the Louisville Cardinals. The final question of the mailbag: how big of a loss is losing Jordan Allen? Well, for those that don't know, Jordan Allen was a commitment in the 2025 class, a really good wide receiver from Buford, Georgia, 5'8", 3-star player flipped from Louisville to Georgia Tech on Monday. This was something that was completely predicted. People knew this was going to happen ever since, he was visiting Nebraska, and then Georgia Tech, with how well they have been attacking NIL and recruiting the state of Georgia. Well, it seemed like the writing was on the wall. I think the loss of Allen, look, I think Jordan Allen is a really good player. He's playing really good football, really speedy player. I think that Louisville does a good job at recruiting wide receivers, to where if they're able to fill the need in the 2025 class, they're going to fill the need in the portal. You have Chris Bell, Kataris Hicks, maybe even Colin Lacey back for 2025, 2026. I think that the loss itself isn't really what I'm caught up on, is that Louisville is losing a lot of their top commitments. Like, they lost Jordan Allen to Georgia Tech. They lost, I forget the guy's name. I think it was Jake Cook to Ohio State, offensive lineman. They lost Tyrone Burris to Indiana. They may lose Eric Hazard to Mississippi State. Like, they are just losing. Like, they lost Josh Johnson to Penn State. Like, they're losing their top commitments. Now, I'm hoping that CJ May and Mason Mims end up Cardinals, but Auburn is, on the trail for both of them. And those guys are, hearing other college coaches, try to get them to flip. So that's something to focus on. But right now, I mean, I think that losing Jordan Allen in itself, it's not a move that's, going to make me panic. It's just the trend that we're seeing with the Cardinals losing a bunch of their commitments in an already small class. Like, I think Louisville now has like 10 guys committed. Now, they are actively trying to flip some players, so that is something to look forward to. But at this point in time, it's not that big of a loss in terms of them not being able to replace him. I think that, you can find fast wide receivers. I think Jordan Allen is going to be a really good player at the college level. But also, at the end of the day, I think wide receiver is a position that I'm not sure I'm really ever going to truly worry about with the Jeff Brohm team, with the way that he's able to recruit. So that's just the way that I'm looking at things. I will say, though, that I'm hoping that Louisville can pull off some flips. Jeff Brohm made it pretty clear that they're going to utilize the portal to fill their needs, and that's, to be expected with this 2025 class. I would like to see in the 2026 class, Louisville start to recruit some better prospects, to where that's fine. If you are, determined and set on just bringing in like 15-ish recruits a year in terms of the number, that's okay. But I think that the average ranking has to be a little bit better. You have to bring in some more impact freshmen. And you really can't use Isaac Brown and Duke Watson as, like, oh, well, what about Isaac Brown and Duke Watson? There's only so many players that, fit that mold, that are able to come in and produce right away. And you're not seeing the exodus of players that people are saying as a rebuttal, like, why are you only going after portal guys? Like, you're not seeing guys leave at the rate that people are trying to use to justify that opinion. So that's just my take on it. But that is going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. We'll come back tomorrow a little bit more in the afternoon, because we're going to recap the Indiana game. We're going to discuss, whoever they're going to play between Gonzaga and West Virginia, and move on past that. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.